Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. More social housing at Little Mountain delayed.
To get the chance to move back into Little Mountain would completely change me and my kids' lives.
Vancouver City Council approves a developer's request 15 years after the site was sold. And hitting the road.
They'll hit this one. You just watch, they'll hit it.
To see why so many semi-trucks have hit overpasses in BC.
People aren't paying attention to what they're seeing.
And how to stop it. Plus, teaching all kinds of dogs new tricks.
It's a beautiful thing to see when the dog and handler can move sheep quietly around the field.
A Port Coquitlam trainer offers lessons to dogs who need jobs.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. It is a saga 15 years in the making. Vancouver's Little Mountain housing site has sat mostly empty since 2009. And now city councillors have voted to delay the social housing units that were promised by the owners of the land. As Yasmin Gandam reports, it's painful news for people who used to call it home.
You said your house was right there.
Yeah, right where the red fire hydrant was. And there was like a row of townhouses.
Walking through what used to be the Little Mountain housing complex on Main Street and 37th Avenue, Michelle Hayoka is taken back to a time she says feels like a dream.
Growing up in Little Mountain was not just, like a regular social housing building. It was a real community.
Hayoka and her family were evicted when she was 13 years old after developer Holborn bought the property in 2008. It demolished the existing housing and promised to build 1,400 market value homes and 282 units of social housing. Since then, though, only 53 of those social units have been built, the property remaining virtually empty for 15 years. In 2021, the city required Holborn to complete the rest of the social housing before it could let people move into the market condos. Last month, Holborn asked the city to lift that requirement, claiming it was hard to get financing without the market housing being built. Now, City Council has voted 7-3 to approve that request.
At the end of the day, we need to build more housing.
Today's vote at City Hall took away that last piece of accountability from the city. And I'm very worried it will result in significantly more delays to that badly needed social housing.
Boyle argues the social housing is especially crucial for families who are struggling to find a place to live. Hayoka is one of them. She now lives on the downtown east side with her 2 kids.
I cannot afford to live anywhere else but the downtown east side right now. So that's my only option right now. So I feel so trapped. I feel like it's my only option. I feel abandoned, and I feel like to get the chance to move back into Little Mountain would completely change me and my kids' lives.
CBC News has asked Holborn to comment on the change, but has not yet heard back. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Our municipal affairs reporter Justin McElroy is here for some analysis. Justin, we saw in that piece that Councillor Christine Boyle voted against the request, but it did pass. What were the arguments for approving it?
Yeah, Mayor Ken Sim and all ABC councillors voted in favor, and they had 2 main reasons. The first is that they said that BC Housing endorsing the request by Holborn was a big factor. BC Housing agreeing with Holborn that getting financing has been difficult for them getting the social housing done first, and that if it's pushed further along, that it would be easier for them to move forward. And then the second one was simply councillors believing that this would help get the project moving, arguing that getting some housing eventually is better than getting no housing at all, which would have been a risk in their minds. Certainly not everyone happy with the decision, but the councillors who voted in for the ruling ABC Vancouver party saying that this was the best situation that could be made given the circumstances.
Justin, as we mentioned, this is a saga 15 years that's been grinding on. Why has it been allowed to go on for so long?
It's a big question for everyone why Little Mountain has been going on this long. The signs outside of the development put up by Holborn say great stories take time to tell. But this is a story that for most people over the last 15 years may not be considered great.
With the previous Vancouver Council having given its approval in principle for zoning and the developer already committed to the project, the housing minister expects construction could begin within a year.
Please don't hold me to this timeline, but I'm fairly confident that we can do it in a shorter period, than 2 years, definitely. It will be shorter than that.
The developer says former residents will get first priority when the new social housing is built.
Nobody likes to move and whatnot, but when they understand that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to give them something better, of course they'll come back to a better unit, definitely. Yeah, I can almost 100% guarantee that, yeah.
If there's community support, part of this land could be rezoned in 6 months. That would allow some social housing and a few condos to be built before the rest of the development is even approved. Still, at that rate, it could be up to 3 years before people live here. The architect, James Chang, presented what he calls the developer's best efforts, a site plan with 1,600 condos. One of the buildings will be 14 stories high.
We have listened to the community. We worked with them for 2 years. We heard everything. Now somebody got to make a decision.
The city says completing the project is one of its top priorities.
We want to get this delivered to the community as soon as possible.
Holborn told CBC News that a project as big as Little Mountain takes time.
Well, we've been making progress maybe behind the scenes, so to speak, and not on the site at this point.
At this point, I believe that Holborn wants to get this housing open, and I believe the City of Vancouver wants to get these homes built too. Certainly the province does. I know that the community wants this housing open yesterday, and I am optimistic that although 2024 is an ambitious schedule for any project in Vancouver, if we all work together, we can get it done and get Little Mountain active again.
And here we are today. This was public government land, and sometimes when government land is sold out, it can make things happen very quickly on it, and sometimes it can be like Little Mountain.
Justin McElroy reporting for us tonight. Thank you. If you are a commuter, you may have been caught in these slowdowns and even shutdowns. Dozens of semi-trucks have hit overpasses in BC over the past 2 years. The latest smash just days ago in the Fraser Valley. In most cases, drivers and their companies are only issued traffic tickets, and frustrations within the industry and at the legislature are growing. Our John Hernandez went for a ride with a lifelong truck driver and instructor who says enough is enough.
Now trucks, gotta be in the stay in this lane always.
87-year-old Doug Clark has just about seen it all behind the wheel, and it's not always pretty.
And yet, so many vehicles hit this one that yeah.
In a short ride along with the truck driver turned instructor, we pass 3 consecutive overpasses that have been struck by semi-truck trailers in just over a year, including this one hit just last week.
Mainly it's that thing we call distracted driving. People aren't paying attention to what they're seeing, or they're thinking of other things rather than driving trucks.
Since December 2021, there's been 29 bridge or overpass strikes in the province. The vast majority have happened in the Lower Mainland, including the overpass at 264 Street and Highway 1, which was struck 6 times. In 24 cases, violation tickets were issued. 6 times, companies were ordered to revise their safety plans. In 5 cases, the carriers were suspended. None have resulted in criminal charges or arrests. Just last month in North Vancouver, an unpermitted driver for Whistler 99 Courier and Freightways struck this overpass and fled. The company was suspended for a week and issued a $3,500 fine.
But it disappoints me, yes.
It takes Doug Clark about a second to assess what went wrong.
The beginning of that was he should have measured how high that is.
Clark calls it a lapse in the basic fundamentals of truck driving.
So the planning has to be how high is the load. That's number one. How high is the load? So the second one is what route can I take that will allow me to pass under it.
That's why he's calling for regular retraining or proficiency tests for commercial drivers to keep standards up, and stiffer fines for violations.
There should be a substantial cost factor involved.
The province says heftier fines are coming, but stands by its training program, which became more rigorous for new drivers in the aftermath of the tragic Humboldt Broncos crash.
We've heard that BC has the strictest and toughest new licensing requirements, and that's true, we do.
For Clark, it's not the new drivers he's worried about, it's the old ones who weren't tested by today's standards. He sees the shortcomings when veteran drivers apply to be teachers at his school.
I get drivers here all the time that cannot drive well enough as instructor wannabes to pass the road tests that our students pass.
Bad habits that can lead to worse outcomes on BC's busiest roads. John Hernandez, CBC News, Langley.
Darius Madavi joins us now. Those trucks on the road needing to stop and chain up if they're heading into the interior tonight. Darius, we got a big warning for some of the mountain passes.
That's right. We've actually got several warnings across the province. It's been a while since we've had to look at that map, this map, but we do have air quality statements in place for a few places around the province, in addition to these freezing rain warnings and special weather statements that have to do with some snow accumulation and freezing rain that's going to be happening on many of the mountain passes. So let's start with the air quality statements in the southeast predominantly, and here in the northeast around Fort St. John. We do have some smoke that's starting to build up. We're not seeing it here in the north, but it is picking it up down here in the southeast. This is likely due to the burning of slash piles that have been building up over the fire season. So no word on when that will end, but those have been sticking around for a while now, a few days by now at least, and it is expected to continue for a few days yet. Meanwhile, we do have this freezing rain warning just for this smaller area, but this is a special weather statement that is covering freezing rain for all these areas as well. And if we look here, we can see why. The specific system is going to be rolling in. It's already covering much of the island, bringing precipitation. This is a model run, but the radar is showing the same thing. And we have it coming up now, going to bring some heavy rains to the island and here in Vancouver. But also as it reaches the cooler parts of the province, as well as, of course, the mountain peaks and mountain passes, it's going to be bringing quite significant snowfall accumulation. But the big worry for officials is that buildup of of freezing rain that is expected. So slippery surfaces, and officials are asking that people avoid traveling unless absolutely necessary.
All right, good advice, Darius. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
To other news now, perhaps they kept you up last night. Fireworks are tightly restricted or even banned throughout much of the Lower Mainland, but last night's Halloween festivities tell a bit of a different story. That is a firework landing and burning on the roof of a Coquitlam home. The home security camera shows that firework lighting up the yard before and landing and burning a hole in the gutter. The homeowner didn't know it happened until this morning.
I just can't imagine how shooting a device up that floats on a parachute with no control is kosher with whoever vets these products. It's just ludicrous.
Atkinson says Mounties told him there's nothing they can do because they have no way of knowing where that floating firework came from. It's illegal to buy or sell fireworks in Coquitlam, and you do need a permit to set them off. BC's poison drug crisis continues to wipe out more lives. The coroner says 175 people are believed to have been killed by them in September. That's 10% less than the number of people killed in September last year, but it is still almost 6 people every day. Most of those deaths were reported in Vancouver, Surrey, and Greater Victoria. The toxic drug crisis has now claimed more than 13,000 lives in this province alone since 2016. Now, the numbers coincide with another report from a panel of experts tasked with looking into BC's toxic drug deaths. One of the recommendations is removing the prescription requirement to broaden access to safer supply. Tanya Fletcher joins us now with details. Tanya, what exactly are they suggesting?
Well, Dan, this is the third review from this panel of 21 experts looking into these drug deaths. And here are their recommendations. This is out of the Chief Coroner's latest report. First and foremost, they're asking for a safer supply outside the healthcare system. That's key. We'll get into more on that later. Also engaging more with people who have lived experience to learn from, and more funding to work with Indigenous leadership on finding solutions. Now, that first one, shifting safe supply outside the medical system, is really the big one. Right now, safer supply options have to be administered by a doctor or a nurse, but the report says 20% of British Columbians don't have a health provider, and more than 200,000 drug users in the province have no access to the safe supply options that currently exist.
Safer supply is not a radical initiative. It's a means to keep people alive and to support them to wellness. It's a means to reduce our loved ones' dependency on a toxic, profit-driven, illicit drug market. It is life support.
Tanya, how are these recommendations being received by the provincial government?
Yeah, that's always the question. You can make as many recommendations as you want, but will they ultimately be adopted? And it doesn't sound promising in this case. BC's Minister of Mental Health and Addictions has essentially rejected the idea of a non-medicalized supply. In a letter to the chief coroner that we just heard from, thanking her for the report, Jennifer Whiteside writes, non-prescription models for the delivery of pharmaceutical alternatives are not under consideration, it reads. Accordingly, she says, I cannot accept the primary recommendation of this report to pursue a non-prescribed model of safer supply. That's from the minister. Now, this is one policy stance that the opposition seems to actually agree with on the NDP.
It's also one of the major models that was rejected by the Stanford Lancet Commission, and it's not a model that is used in other locations that have been successful in tackling significant drug problems. I find it really concerning. We need to continue to address this as the medical issue that it's been identified as.
Now, put all of this in the context of toxic drug deaths, now double what they were in 2016 when BC declared it a public health emergency. Dan?
Tanya Fletcher joining us live tonight. Thank you. Well, toxic drugs don't just kill people. Those who have overdosed on them and survived are sometimes left with long-lasting injuries. Yvette Bren meets those whose lives have been crippled.
Hey, what's the matter? Hey, you miss me?
Hugh Lampkin began using drugs from pot to PCP to escape when he was about 12 years old, growing up in Toronto.
You know, you gotta walk a mile in a man's shoes to know exactly what's going through his head.
Years of using drugs helped deal with memories of abuse.
I didn't get any joy, but I would get comfort. Like, I was able to cope and deal with things.
But a year and a half ago, he had a bad fall.
When I went to stand back up again, I couldn't stand up straight, and it's been there ever since.
He's one of thousands of Canadians with chronic health issues related to past opioid abuse or overdoses. According to the Canadian Institute of Health Information, in 2022 to 2023, there were close to 6,000 Canadian overdoses, and 327 left people with anoxic brain injuries or brain damage due to a lack of oxygen. Some who don't overdose end up with infections which can lead to damage of organs or bones.
If it spreads to the bones, causing an infection called osteomyelitis, it'll cause the bones to collapse so that people will have collapsed spines, not be able to stand up straight, not be able to walk properly.
Injections can introduce infections. These can spread, causing abscesses or sores. Lesions from drug use can be aggressive and lead to amputations.
This is the office. My desk.
Experts say more study is needed to help people like Hugh heal and rehabilitate.
And I went to see a specialist about 2 weeks ago, and he came out the room. And when he came out the room, I knew it. I just knew by his face that they were going to say no. And he was saying the reason that they're not going to operate is because when I was younger, I was doing drugs.
Many aren't considered for organ transplants or complex surgeries, like Hugh, who no longer uses drugs. But he says he has so much more to give to help others escape addiction. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver police have raided 3 businesses they suspect are selling psychedelic mushrooms. Police say they executed 3 search warrants at stores in Marpole, Mount Pleasant, and on Granville Street. Some of those businesses had highlighted what they said were the health benefits of mushrooms. Police say they've been clear that psilocybin is a controlled drug, and anyone who breaks the law by trafficking could be arrested and charged. The owner of the mushroom storefront says it's a step backwards for progressive drug policies, and he plans to fight the matter in court. Vancouver drivers and pedestrians may see new traffic safety measures coming to crosswalks citywide. A council committee voted on a motion brought forward by Councillor Christine Boyle. She wants to install more than 100 extra traffic enforcement cameras to the most dangerous intersections in the city. An amended motion was passed calling for a study of what other collision prevention measures might be best at each location.
Instead of action, what we're getting is more studies. There have been numerous studies. We know that speed is an issue. We know that speed enforcement cameras are one important solution. So I'm disappointed that the amendment from Councillor Montague watered the motion down.
Road safety advocates say the vote waters down the original motion and delays its rollout. The next step is for the mayor to approach the province to ask permission to implement the new measures and collect fines. BC employers are now required to start listing salary or wage amounts when they go looking for workers. The government's Pay Transparency Act, which was passed in the spring, is now in effect. The province says it will help address systemic discrimination in workplaces. Employers also can no longer ask job applicants about what they have been paid at positions at other jobs. As BC searches for affordable housing options to help curb the housing crisis, the provincial government unveiled its plan for giving homeowners an incentive to build another unit on their property. But as Lindsay Duncombe explains, its requirements are giving some people a bit of pause.
And this area will be the TV wall with the cabinet.
Roughly half the homes Vancouver developer Leo Lee builds are laneway houses, backyard structures often rented out to offset a hefty mortgage. When Lee learned the province wants to provide a cash incentive for homeowners to build suites like these, he got excited to build one for himself. But
I want to check for myself. Yeah, but at the same time, I have a little bit doubt whether there will be too much criteria.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act.
It's part of new legislation to change zoning rules and increase density in the face of the housing crisis.
We're excited to support homeowners to create new secondary suites through our new Secondary Suite Incentive Program, which will be launching this spring.
It would legalize those suites common in Vancouver across the province and help cover the cost up to $40,000.
It's a very generous subsidy, and that I think will encourage people.
The subsidy comes as a forgivable loan. The homeowner pays up front and later gets a rebate if they follow the rules, including that the suite be rented out at below market rent. But with construction and permits, Lee says a basic laneway house can run you $200 to $300,000.
If you're renting it as affordable housing, are you going to make your money back on a laneway house?
I don't think so.
In Toronto, laneway houses were allowed 4 years ago. Construction has been steady but slow.
It takes a few years before people start to take advantage of the zoning permissions because they need to work through all those questions and issues.
Given the high costs of borrowing and building, economists say don't expect thousands of new laneway houses to pop up overnight, despite government cash. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
He's been out of politics for less than a year now, but former Premier John Horgan has a new job. He's going to be Canada's next ambassador to Germany. The Prime Minister's office announced the appointment this morning. Horgan was first elected to the BC legislature in 2005 and became Premier in 2017. He stepped down last year after being treated for throat cancer. He retired as MLA for Langford Juan de Fuca at the end of March. And in April, he joined the board of a BC-based coal company. Justin Trudeau congratulated Horgan today and says he believes he will advance Canada and Germany's shared goals in clean energy and middle-class jobs. The last BC Premier to be appointed to such a post was Gordon Campbell. He served as Canada's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom from 2011 to 2016. Things are not calm and cool in the world of Canadian curling today. One of Canada's top players is hurling verbal stones about the quality of the facilities at an international championship being held this week in Kelowna. More now from the CBC's Brady Strachan.
Hurling is a vocal sport. There's often a lot of yelling as the rocks approach the house. But here in Kelowna, it's the shots being fired outside the rink that are getting the most attention.
They put the curlers second, or maybe not even second, but last. Not providing us a place to warm up, not giving us separate locker rooms, not allowing us to watch practice, which in my 30 years of curling I've never seen happen before.
They go, and he caught them both.
Newfoundland's Brad Gushu is a household name in curling. A 5-time men's national champion, a world champion, and an Olympic gold medalist. This week, he's competing in Kelowna with curlers from around the globe to qualify for the upcoming World Championships. But he claims the facilities here are far from world class.
There's a level of disappointment. I think, the World Curling Federation really penny pinched on the production here and has caused, here in Canada, TSN to drop the coverage. That's not good for the game. It's not good for the event. And just because they wanted to save a few dollars.
His main criticism, the venue itself, a local curling club rather than a large arena. Organizers say even for an international tournament like this, that's not always possible.
This is definitely tighter than we're normally at, but we hear the feedback that we've gotten from Brad and take that general feedback and work it in as we go forward.
Other competitors say a bigger venue would be nice, but for some, like the curlers representing India,
this is a sport where the community is bigger than the game itself. What we do on ice is a very small part.
It's being able to compete that's important.
They've played in some pretty amazing events and some pretty amazing venues. Would this event be a little lackluster compared to some of those? Possibly, but it's a curling event with a bunch of great volunteers and a bunch of great people.
As the final rocks are being thrown here in Kelowna, organizers say a bit of constructive criticism is always welcome, even if it's from the sport's biggest name. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Digging for diamonds in the dirt. How those precious stones can help us get to greener forms of energy. Darius Madavi will explain how right after this. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. People in Charlottetown are raising concerns about dump trucks hauling gravel without a cover. As Wayne Thibodeau shows us, they claim it's unsafe and it needs to stop.
A steady stream of trucks come and go from this gravel pit in the heart of Charlottetown. These trucks without a tarp covering their gravel. Residents who live across from the gravel pit say they're fed up. They want highway officials to do something before somebody gets hurt.
With safety. And like I said, our windshields, we don't need to have our windshields dented or scratched or cracked or smashed or car accidents because a result of because there's gravel flying on the road and maybe the cause of an accident.
Anna Hardy is one of the residents who lives nearby. She's even started a petition asking officials to ensure loads are tarped before leaving the pit. She says it might be time for the pit to be relocated outside city limits.
It's very dangerous because the gravel flies. And my concern is that somebody's going to get hurt someday and they don't tarp their loads. I spoke to the owner of the gravel pit and he said it takes too much time to cover the loads each time.
An official with Island Coastal confronted residents after they spoke with CBC News. He told them the pit has been there a lot longer than the nearby apartment buildings. He wouldn't do an interview, but says his company is following the rules. Highway officials confirm they are. There are no rules requiring tarping, but drivers are responsible for anything that falls off a truck. Truckers can be fined up to $500. About 20 truckers from across PEI were charged last year. The head of Highway Safety Enforcement says he's not convinced tarping would solve the problem.
Normally what happens is a truck is loaded with a loader, and sometimes it spills over the sides and it'll be on the aprons and stuff. So a trucker really should be out cleaning that stuff off the side so it doesn't end up on the road. You could make it look pretty on the outside and say, okay, everything's tarped, but it's not fixing the problem if it's coming off the aprons, due to bad loading and not being swept off.
Dowling says stepped-up enforcement usually helps, but with only a handful of highway safety officials on the roads across the island, it can be difficult to be everywhere all the time. He says drivers can also do their part by backing off when they see a truck ahead. Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Charlottetown.
researchers at UBC have given new meaning to the term finding diamonds in the rough. A recent breakthrough means scientists can now identify where diamonds are buried by looking at microorganisms in the soil. But it's not just diamonds. Researchers say this soil analysis technique can be used to find all sorts of minerals, including those essential to the green energy transition. Our scientist Darius Mahdavi joins us now to explain how all of this works. Darius, microorganisms, soil, diamonds, how are these all connected?
It might seem a bit random. I mean, most people think of bacteria as being what causes infection or in their gut, but it makes sense. Let's think about if we had a mineral that's buried deep underground, and we have the soil directly above it is going to be altered as a result of that mineral. And then the soil above that will also be altered all the way up to the surface. So in this case, let's say that mineral is kimberlite. This is the rock that can contain diamond ore. As it alters the chemistry of the soil, that'll be carried up right to the surface where we have microbes. And those microbes will change as a result of those minerals. So there's already been work done on testing the soil chemistry directly to test for the makeup that might suggest certain mineral deposits below. But the changes can be very subtle and easy to miss, which is why we're lucky to have people like Bianca Phillips, a PhD student at UBC, who was smart enough to ask for help from a surprising place, those microbes.
They are better geochemists than we are. When it comes to geochemistry, we're really just limited by our analytical tools. So the instrumentation, how sensitive is it? How subtle of an anomaly are we actually going to see? But microbes, there's so many of them in the soil. We have sort of a bigger, kind of a bigger toolbox to a certain extent that might potentially be indicators to play with. And they are very sensitive to changes in their environment.
And this really works. So Phillips and her collaborators tested this in the lab by adding kimberlite to soil from tundras and seeing how the community of microbes in the soil changed. And then armed with that knowledge, they went out into the field in the Northwest Territories and found that those same microbes that loved the addition of kimberlite to the diamond ore, to the rock containing diamond ore in their soil in the lab, were found in high quantities above a known kimberlite deposit. And at a second site, those same indicator microbes precisely located kimberlite buried tens of meters underground.
Wow. So, Darius, I understand you were not the biggest fan of diamonds. Can we find other things with this method?
Yes, and for good reason. Diamonds are objectively overpriced, and they're not actually a rare rock. They're really just riding on possibly the most successful marketing campaign ever. But that's a story for another time. And fortunately, yes, using these same methods, we could identify indicator microbes for all sorts of minerals. The researchers are already looking into what species of microbe might suggest copper deposits below, which would be huge for the green energy transition because we need those for batteries and new technologies. And this could be used for a whole host of other minerals as well. Here's what Phillips had to say.
I think where we really see this potentially having an impact is in these covered environments where we don't know what's going on. We're not getting a geochemical signal perhaps at all, or at least not a very good one. And the microbes might actually be sensitive enough to tell us where things are and hopefully allow us to find more mineral deposits.
So can people zip home now and start turning the sod in their backyard if they actually have a yard?
We're not quite there yet. Now, the researchers have started to identify good indicator species for kimberlite, meaning diamonds, and copper in the Northwest Territories, but this is only the start. After all, mineral deposits are not the only thing that determines what species are in the soil. We have different climates and other things that really matter.
When we're talking about copper, that's going to affect them in a very different way than a kimberlite. Diamond or wood. So yeah, very different communities. But when it comes to soils, there's no one community that's homogeneous or the same across the world, but we do see patterns in soils depending on the climate.
So now Phillips is working to untangle the effects of climate and soil types and all these other factors with the end goal of building up databases of indicator species that could be used in many different environments, which would be huge considering the current toolbox for seeking out new mineral deposits is actually very limited. And this would be an incredibly powerful tool to add to that toolbox.
Climate and science specialist Darius Mahdavi, it's never boring. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
A New York courtroom became a family affair today. Donald Trump Jr. took the stand in his father's fraud case. What he had to say after this.
This is Edgemont Village in North Vancouver, just before midnight last night. This is the same street on the same night 26 years ago, the night of the '66 Halloween riot, when over 3,000 teenagers stormed the small community, hurling eggs and tomatoes at police and smashing store windows. Randy Raimondo was there.
Every year, Halloween, kids used to come here, and word got out over all over Vancouver, and kids from East Vancouver, Marpole, Dunbar, as well as the North Van kids and West Van. They turned the fire hoses on us, and finally the police, I remember the police lining up, hanging out of the windows of their squad cars and driving down along the sidewalks and just clubbing anybody that was near the sidewalk.
In recent months, kids have been turning the clubs on each other in a territorial war that has parents and police deeply concerned.
And we can't help but feel, too, that just the recent events, violence, crowd violence, that probably kept a lot of people at home. Perhaps they're using good common sense. When people know they are being observed and the police cars are going by on a regular basis, yes, they're going to mind their P's and Q's. And I can't help but think that the extent of the patrols and ensuring that the cars were visible as often as possible aided in keeping things quite quiet.
Whether it was the heavy police presence or the heightened awareness following a rash of random attacks, the message sent out last night is that communities like Edgemont Village will continue to take a stand against violence on its streets. Anna Saraldi, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Donald Trump Jr. began testifying today at his father's fraud trial in New York City. He's set to be back on the witness stand tomorrow. And as Chris Reyes tells us, he's not the only Trump expected in court.
I should have worn makeup.
For the first time in this trial, the spotlight was on a different Donald. No former president this time, despite his constant presence during the last 5 weeks of proceedings. Instead, his eldest son was the only Trump in the room and the first in the family to take the witness stand.
How's it going so far?
For 2 hours, New York State attorneys grilled Donald Jr. about his roles and responsibilities in the Trump Organization, where he's an executive vice president overseeing the family's vast real estate portfolio. The allegation against him that he played a direct role in certifying the financial statements used to overvalue the company's assets by billions of dollars. A charge Don Jr. repeatedly denied on the stand. When it came to what went into the documents in question, he said, "The accountants worked on it. That's what we paid them to do." After Donald Trump Jr.'s testimony, next on the stand, his brother Eric, and then next week, his sister Ivanka. However, she has appealed the recent ruling from the judge forcing her to take the stand. Ivanka Trump's lawyers arguing that her testimony wouldn't be relevant given that she left her father's company and New York in 2017. Whether she takes the stand or not, the Trump children are expected to show a united front and loyalty to the family business.
I expect, that they'll be quite tied together and trying in their testimony, and they probably, have talked about that so that they're so they don't contradict each other to the degree that might occur.
Donald Jr.'s testimony continues tomorrow. His father is not expected back in court until next week for the much anticipated moment when Donald Trump takes the stand. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Well, the war between Hamas and Israel continues to grind on. The CBC's Ellen Morrow reports from Jerusalem on how humanitarian aid groups are responding, and a warning, some viewers may find this story disturbing.
The desperate scramble to save the injured, a day after Israeli airstrikes shattered the Jabalia refugee camp. Dozens reportedly killed, many more lives scarred, and reports of another blast there today. We haven't done anything, this man says. Why is this happening to us? Israel is defending the strike that it says killed a top Hamas commander, hiding out in tunnels below residential buildings, military officials say, accusing militants of using civilians as human shields. Hamas denies that commander was there, claiming without evidence the strike killed 7 civilian hostages, including 3 foreign passport holders. For Gaza civilians, the suffering deepens, the aftermath of a strike in Han Yunis, the south of Gaza, where Israel said civilians would be safer. But it's hard to even know the true extent of Gaza's pain. Communications and internet services were cut there again for part of the day.
It is simply not easy at all to lose the connection with our colleagues in Gaza because we know that they are in constant dangers.
This is the command center of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society in the West Bank. This team works tirelessly and under heavy anxiety, helping to coordinate medics on the ground in Gaza. 4 of them killed on the job by airstrikes, the Red Crescent says, since the war began. And Nabal Farsek knows that number will likely grow.
Each day they have to be encountered to horrific scenes, heartbreaking scenes for children, women who are killed due to this continuous bombardment.
Israel's ground offensive into Gaza expands every day. New video shows Israeli naval ships firing into the territory. The Israeli military says it's hit more than 11,000 Hamas targets since the start of the war. Israel is counting its losses too. 15 soldiers dead so far. This is the funeral for 20-year-old Adi Leon, killed in ground raids in Gaza Tuesday. Eden Harrell trained with Leon for 8 months, shocked by the loss of her friend.
I'm not even fully, I need to still take the time to heal and kind of be okay with everything that's happening.
In Gaza, healing may be impossible for so many, with no pause to the fighting in sight. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Jerusalem.
They're house pets, but their true calling may be on the farm, bringing herders to the field and just letting them take charge. The benefits are coming up. Stay with us.
I strongly recommend winter tires. These are your lifeline. Tires are what keep you connected to the road. When you turn, you want to turn. When you stop, you want to stop. If your tire's not doing that for you, your next step is a crash. So the winter tires will be specifically designed to wick away moisture, and you see how a lot of these grooves are cut kind of at an angle and curved out. So that's going to help wick away the moisture and allow the water to be pushed away. The other side of it is you have all these little cuts and these little sipes in there. Those are designed kind of as when you push on it, each one will kind of bend over and give you a little extra traction. There's signs that you want to look at when you're looking at a tire and determining if it's usable or not. So the first thing is, if you look right around the edge around here, right around the seam around there, and sometimes in the edge right where the writing is. You want to look for that rubber being worn out, and you want to look for any weather cracks. If you have any cracking on your sidewall or anything like that, the rubber is just no good anymore. It's worn out, you don't want it any longer. Typically, most manufacturers say once a tire is 10 years old, the rubber compound just isn't very good anymore. This one in this little block says 0313. The first two numbers there, 03, that's the third week. And then the 13 is for 2013. So this tire was built in the third week of 2013. So this tire is more than 10 years old. I would not consider putting it on a vehicle. This one has a listing on the side of the tire of a mud and snow tire. So you will see M/S for mud and snow tire. Mud and snow tires are generally considered an all-season tire, where that mountain skate with a little snowflake, that's what gets you to be a winter tire. For somebody who's new to the country, perhaps never seen snow, I would 100% strongly push winter tires, because if you haven't driven in this type of weather before, it's a real eye-opener. I would do the same for a young driver. So if you have somebody 16, 17 years old, maybe have their learners, a good thing to get them in the habit of understanding the importance of winter tires and how much more traction they will give you.
Having a dog is a big responsibility, especially if your breed needs space to run and play. A trainer in Port Coquitlam is now offering dog parents a break by teaching their pets how to herd sheep. Our Michelle Gomez hit the farm to see how it's done.
Come by. Lie down.
Dogs are put to work at Blue Collar Farm, keeping sheep in line. Kylie Larson has been wrangling sheep with dogs for 11 years.
It takes a long time to get good at this, right? And I think my favorite part is when the handler and dog can really, they click, right? And everything falls into place perfectly, right? And then, it's a beautiful thing to see when the dog and handler can move sheep quietly around the field. You're insane. That'll do come.
Most of her clients are herding dogs that live in the city. She says it's a valuable outlet for dogs who were bred to herd but don't get to in their daily lives. These dogs include shepherds and border collies. They have a natural instinct to control other animals and can become restless when they're not doing what they were born to do.
The herding dogs are among the most intelligent dogs, and they love to learn, and they learn well. If they aren't properly stimulated, they can develop behavioral problems.
Get off. Now you got a nose smudge on.
Draco is a 5-year-old Rottweiler. He comes here every week to run sheep.
He needs to work. He does chores and stuff around the house. And so, yeah, this is a great outlet. He loves it, and I love it, so.
Steady him off the pad.
If your dog is energetic, eager to please, and if they are circling you or nipping at your heels, Larson says they may benefit from the sport.
If you don't have something for them to do, sometimes that can, leach out in other ways, right? Like reactivity, boredom, barking, chewing, all that.
Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.
Talk about dogs with jobs. Darius Madevi joins us with the forecast. Before we get to that, you grew up with dogs, correct?
I did.
Would any of them have done that?
No. My dogs were more the type that ignored a squirrel running in front of them, but then barked and chased a leaf for 20 minutes. Yeah.
Great guard dogs, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, totally. But that reminds me that I need to start pitching stories that have cute animals in them so I can go be with the cute animals. That's the goal.
You ignore animal stories at your peril.
Yes.
A great reporter taught me that. Thanks, Ted Field. Anyway.
Should we talk about the weather?
Why not? Let's do that.
Yeah, not super dog friendly if you do, unless you want a really wet carpet, because we do have this major rain system coming through. Most of it does come overnight. By tomorrow morning, by the time people are probably heading out, most of it has passed the island, but it'll continue until around noon here on the Lower Mainland. And then also overnight and around, continuing right through the afternoon, that's going to be hitting all the mountain passes that we talked about earlier. And then the next wave, as you see here, doesn't come until overnight Friday into Saturday. So should be a bit of a drier one later in the day, Thursday, and potentially Friday as well, but still a chance of showers. So over the next 24 hours, expect quite a buildup of rain on the island and on the Lower Mainland, but the big story is that freezing rain possibility and that snow accumulation that we're going to be seeing continuing all the way up. Mostly the north being spared. It's mostly the southern half of the province we're going to be seeing that buildup, but still some fairly significant rainfall, especially for the more central parts of the island. That's really where we're going to be keeping an eye on, in addition to those mountain passes over the next few days. But temperatures have, for the most part in the south, returned to seasonal, right where we'd want to be this time of year. Still a bit chillier in the north, and we're not having the same luck in returning to seasonal, where we're still quite a few degrees below where we'd usually be this time of year, but not too out of the ordinary. Definitely better than we were earlier. Tonight, our lows have also started to come up as a result of that cloud. You can see that rain and snow starting to build in, and then continuing tomorrow, but you can see the showers do lighten, especially here on the coast, so not too much to worry about across the province. And here in Vancouver, we have that morning rain tomorrow starting to ease off, but still a chance of showers continuing into the afternoon, and then those overnight showers return on Friday for a pretty wet weekend.
Keep the dogs inside if they're not herding the sheep.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Good tip. Thanks.
Thanks.
The federal government's carbon tax plan has caused a firestorm in political circles. The Trudeau Liberals are allowing a 3-year carbon tax exemption for home heating oil to help offset that fuel's higher cost. But Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling for an exemption on all home heating until the next federal election. Marina von Stackelberg has more on the stakes of this heated debate.
Rallying his caucus in Ottawa, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says it's fundamentally unfair. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is only exempting some Canadians from the carbon tax.
He divides by race, sexuality, vaccine status, and now region.
The temporary 3-year break applies to those who heat with oil. That fuel is used in only 3% of homes, found mostly in Atlantic Canada.
A divide and conquer strategy being condemned even by some New Democrats. The NDP in Saskatchewan and Alberta have come out against the 2 classes of citizenship that Justin Trudeau has imposed.
The opposition NDP in those 2 provincial legislatures support motions to demand all heating be exempt. Saskatchewan has threatened to stop collecting the carbon tax altogether and is preparing for possible legal action by the federal government.
I guess if it comes to that point where somebody's going to carbon jail, it likely will be me.
In Ottawa, the Conservatives are calling on the federal NDP to support a motion they'll introduce to demand all home heating be exempt.
Will Jagmeet Singh stand with provincial NDPers? Will he stand with the voters who put their trust in his MPs in places like Timmins and other cold northern communities? Or will he once again sell out working class Canadians in order to suck up to Justin Trudeau? That will be his decision.
Yes or no, will you support the Conservative motion to call for an exemption for all home heating?
We are discussing the Conservative motion in our team. We're discussing that still.
We need a credible carbon pricing plan, and Mr. Trudeau has blown the credibility of his carbon plan by trying to defend his MPs in Atlantic Canada without a national plan.
So would you support Pierre Poilievre's motion?
We shall see.
Whether the NDP decide to support this Conservative motion on Monday has the potential to drive a wedge between the New Democrats and the Liberals. The NDP have been supporting this Liberal minority government on key votes as part of their confidence and supply agreement. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Halloween might be over, but the treats are going to last. Up next, piggies at a rescue in Prince George enjoy a pumpkin-y feast. Stick around.
With lyrics written by Harriet Hamilton, performed tonight by Thompson Egbo Egbo, Jackie Richardson, and accompanied by ballerina Jasmine Renee, here is Oscar Peterson's Hymn to Freedom.
When every heart joins every heart, and together yearns for liberty, that's when we'll be free. Every hand joins every hand, and together molds our destiny. That is when we all will be free. Any hour, any day, the time soon will come when man will live in dignity. That's when we will be free. And oh, when every man, woman, and child joins in our song, and together let's sing in harmony, 'cause that's when we'll be free. That's when we'll be. We're talking about liberty. We're talking about destiny. We're talking about dignity. Let's talk about harmony. In the words and the melody of Oscar Peterson, he said, that's when we'll be free. God bless you all.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. With the changes to how Canada is able to access journalism online and on social media, we want to assure you that when you're looking for CBC News, you'll always be able to find us. Wherever you are in BC, local news, breaking stories, and the latest from around the world is at your fingertips any time of the day with the free CBC News app and online at cbcnews.ca. For news you can trust, download the CBC News app and stay connected wherever you are.
Fun fact, one of a pig's favorite treats is pumpkins. So volunteers at the Tickled Pig Rescue Society in Prince George are collecting leftover jack-o'-lanterns to feed to the animals. And no one's hogging these goodies.
It's probably Christmas for the piggies. We go around and collect up everybody's jack-o'-lanterns, pumpkins, anything that would otherwise go in the garbage, and it will feed the pigs for probably a good part of the winter.
What makes pumpkin such a good food for pigs?
I don't know what it is, they just love them. And for me, if they're free, we will take them.
We go around, we have the kids out for the day. They usually hop out of the truck and start running, grabbing pumpkins, and we load up, the back of my truck probably 2 or 3 times a day.
If we get a nice, good, cold winter, sometimes they bury in the snow, but they'll stay frozen in the backyard, which is nice because I don't have a lot of freezer space. And then through the winter, we'll just light a fire in the backyard and roast up some pumpkin, and they all come out, stand by the fire, and eat away till their bellies are full.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Have a good night.